Hi, everybody. Welcome to All Things Metaphysical podcast. This episode is on 3/22/23.
Yes,
Yes, that is today.
that is the day. Yes.
So I am the Gail portion.
I am the Kelly portion. What
So,
are we talking about?
well, first, let's do some housekeeping. If you're watching, please subscribe and like our channel, post comments. If
Please.
you're watching us live, feel free to put comments in and we will respond to the comments. We're not going to mention people's names just because we've decided not to do that, but we will respond to your comments. So if you have any comments, please put them in the comment section. The other housekeeping thing, I want you to tell us all about your new books that are one is out and one is coming out very soon.
It is released.
Uh-huh.
Amazon hasn't quite updated their files,
Okay.
but the one that I have, I don't have both of them. I have this one, On the Road to Enlightenment. It's when on the road to enlightenment, don't forget to take out the trash. Um, it's a re-release. Some things had changed since the book first came out like 1.5 years ago. So I re-released it with updates. The other one I do not have, but it is a poetry book, and it is called Pieces of My Soul. People are ordering it off Barnes and Nobles. I don't know why it's still pre-release other places. So yeah, please get them.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Don't ever do two books within a week. It's just insane.
I
Don't do
I
it.
think I did mine a month apart when
Yeah.
there's 2 books that I put out really close together. Yeah, I'll never do that again too. But it's funny
Yeah.
because we all know, well, some of you who've watched and listened to our shows, is I was very prolific for a period of years. Like I put out
Mhm.
like 8 books
You did. Yeah.
and well, a couple are mandala books, but I put out like 8 books and it's just like I haven't last year I think or the year before I put out the children's book, which I love the title, Be Free to Be Yourself, the Magical Unicorn.
Yep.
And then I put out the Jesus book, Jesus and the Jewish Girl. But other than that, like I have not had a desire to write lately, which is interesting because I was so prolific for quite a
I,
while.
I think it goes like in cycles because before I did these two, I would write and then I would stop and then I would write and then I would stop. And finally, what ended up happening is I have two more books that are going to go out this year because I never sat down and cohesively wrote about anything. It
Mhm.
was just I would work on this story for a while and then I'd write a poem and then I'd go over here and do that. But it just, I looking at my computer one day, I'm like, there are 4 books that I've been working on for like 6 years. Enough. Get them done. Do it. So I got the first two out. So that was
It
an
is so
accomplishment.
awesome. It is awesome when you finally finish projects that have been sitting for a while.
Yeah.
So I know that one of the things we wanted to talk about, which might be difficult for people, but I think it's important conversation because we've both heard lately that a lot of people are having friends, family members, loved ones who are close to transitioning or crossing over. And I know that I, for example, had a conversation today with a palliative care nurse for one of my loved ones who's not quite ready to cross over yet, but very interesting discussion. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what kinds of questions you've been getting asked and what's coming up for you?
A lot of people are very, very sick right now.
Yeah.
A lot of people have one foot out the door. Um, and I tell all of my clients, and I have a bunch of clients who are going through this right now. Free will comes into play,
Mhm.
and you cannot tell someone when to transition. That's no, don't do that. But it's interesting how different people do different things.
Mhm.
Some people, they're all about getting everything done that they hadn't gotten done, and they feel like they have to do these things. And that's fine if that's the way they're doing. Other people are laying in bed waiting to die. It's like two extremes. And whatever your loved one is doing, know that that is okay. Know that that is what they need to do. Um, I have a relative that recently lost a spouse, and that is a gut wrenching thing.
Mhm.
And they were married for a bajillion years. So that made it even worse. And even though he had been sick for a while, he really wasn't acting really sick. And then poof, he was gone.
Mhm.
And that's a shock because when you're dealing with someone with a incurable disease, which he had, you just don't know when your last day with them is going to be. And I kind of like, even though it was shocking,
Mhm.
I kind of like the way that he just like, okay, I'm done now. And my own grandmother did that. She told me when she was going to die. She specifically said, okay, I'm going to go home and I'm going to go to bed and that will be it. And that's wonderful, really, even though it's kind of shocking. But the other side of that is you do have people who are lingering, who are just not here. They're not fully alive anymore, but they're definitely not dead either. So that makes it really, really hard, not only on them, but on everyone
Well,
around them, the
I think
people that they love them.
I think for a lot of people, and I went through this with both parents when they were transitioning. But knowing what I knew, like you just said, I knew the exact day and time that they were going to die, which made it harder for me in some
Yeah,
ways. Um, and, I'll just retell the story. I was in my mom's hospital room the day that she transitioned. And she always hated like that piped in hospital music, and they had it on
mhm,
like in the bed that she
right,
was in. And so I shut that off. And then I was just sitting there, I was holding her hand. And I saw my loved one from the other side come to get her. And she said, I'm not going with, meaning me, I'm not going with her here. She did not, even though I would have thought that was like the greatest gift, my
right,
mother did not want me to be there when it was going to happen. So she told me exactly what time it was going to be. It was going to be at 9:03 at night. So it was 10 to 9. And my friend was sitting there with me. I'm like, we have to leave now. And she's like, why? I said, because my mother's going to transition in 15 minutes.
right.
And part of me, I got down to the parking lot. I just wanted to run up so much and be there, but I knew that wasn't my mother's wishes. And so, no matter how hard it was, so I went home and then I just sat and waited for the phone to ring.
Yeah.
And then half an hour later, the hospital called. And, but it's never easy.
Mm-mm.
And watching your loved ones, because to us it looks like they're suffering.
Right, right.
And I think that that's the hardest part, especially towards the end sometimes where there's
Yeah,
gasping for breath. We see that and we see that as pain, but oftentimes they're already on the other side. Their physical body just has to let go. So
yeah,
they're not experiencing it as we're experiencing watching them experience it. And I think for me, that's always been the harder part
right.
is watching the physical body coming to its conclusion. The person is already in spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes they are in a degree of pain, but I think watching is so much harder than being a patient. I know I had, well, I've had several major surgeries, but I know at one point my friends around me said that was so much harder watching me go through that than than them going through it. And a couple of my friends at that point had also had some major health issues. So having been both the patient and the person watching the patient, I think I agree. It's harder to watch.
My
But you
mom
just
had a lot
want
of
to do
pain,
it.
but the last day she was like, she was pain free. But the 2 days before that, I mean, it was. I was up all night with her. But if you're watching, welcome. Apparently, we're talking about very deep different things today. If you guys have questions or experiences you want to share, please put them in the comments section. We will read them and talk about them.
Yeah.
But again, this is, and it's not, I guess the way that I'll say it is because a lot of people are transitioning now because they're not ready to make the leap that we're going to make as humanity.
Yeah.
So it's almost, and I hate to use these words, I just don't know what other words to use. It's like a mass exodus.
Yeah, it is.
Everyone who can't make the leap into the new energy will be transitioning in different ways.
Right.
And I think that that's the really hard part. I mean, I think unfortunately we're going to see some natural disasters too. That
Yeah, there have been a bunch lately. And some of them haven't hit the news in the States,
Mhm.
but I know people in other countries, and there's been, an earthquake in India, and there's been, some mudslides down south, and just a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
And it always amazes me how I don't watch the news, and yet people will call me and tell me about these things, or they'll send me an email with pictures, which is usually what happens from Brazil. But a lot of stuff happening,
Mhm.
and it's all kind of the same type of things. If you're going to have a natural disaster that wipes out an entire town and kills 35 people, well, that's 35 people that transitioned right there from that area. That's going to leave a scar,
Mhm.
and it just does. It leaves an energetic scar. And I think that's part of what happens when we are watching someone. And I don't like this term. It was a term taught to me when I was doing a lot of hospice work, actively dying. I do not like that term, but I don't have another way to explain it. Um, it's
Actively transitioning back
There
to
we go. That's better. Um, but it does leave a scar. Grief leaves a scar.
Mhm.
And even though it may not be a physical scar, it's still there and it's still something that needs to heal.
Mhm.
And I think when you have so much going on at the same time, it just makes it that much more difficult to heal.
And I think that especially in the West, the way that we view it makes it more difficult too. Because, like, I don't know how many people said to me, "Well, after the first year, it'll be easier."
No.
No, I just will have gotten through the first of everything. That doesn't necessarily make it easier. And I know a grief counselor explained that to me, but that's people's need to make it okay because people can't sit with grief.
Right.
People people have a really hard time sitting with people who are in pain, emotional pain and physical pain, but in
Yep.
this case, I'm talking about emotional pain.
Right.
And so people say things to try and make you feel better in those moments, and some of those things actually make it worse.
The worst thing you can do, and I've said this forever, and people still tell me I'm wrong. The worst thing you can do is not talk about the person who transitioned.
Mhm.
They existed. There's a wound there. You can't go to someone who's just lost their spouse and say, oh, well, let's go over here and look at this. It's just, you have to talk about it. That's the best thing you can do, is allow them to talk about it.
Sorry, we're both reading this long message. And again, I think it's about giving yourself time to feel the pain
Yeah.
and believing that there will be times where the light starts to come back in. It doesn't all come back at once. I know that, the story I used to tell to my clients all the time is one of the hospitals I have worked at had to drive right by the cemetery every day on my way to work that my grandmother was in. And one day I just noticed that I didn't, like, every day for like 6 months to a year, I'd be crying when I got to work. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I drove by the cemetery. I'm sad.
Right.
And then one day I noticed I got to work and I wasn't crying.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. It could be 1 year, it could be 5 years. Everybody has a different amount of time that it takes for them to heal. And I think one of the things too, I'm addressing kind of the question from this person who wrote in, is that when everyone in a family is affected and you're an empath, it's going to take longer because you're transmuting everybody else's grief.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's just about giving yourself grace to go through what you need to go through, knowing that the light will come back. And it's funny because I think we think one day it's just going to be better. And it's like, can you think back to maybe yesterday? Did you even laugh for 15 minutes?
Right.
You know, did you have support from someone? You know, the grief isn't 24 hours a day. There's those little glimpses during the day where things have shifted, but it, a day as a whole seems to be all we feel is like the grief. But if you could break it down, going, did I laugh yesterday? Did I smile yesterday? Was someone kind to me yesterday? That's the light coming back in.
Yeah. The thing about grief is you never get over it.
No.
It doesn't go away. You grow around it. It becomes a piece of who you are. And no matter how long it's been, I lost my best friend in 1987. There are still days where I'm like, I can hear an old song
Mhm.
and it puts me right back there. Sometimes, like we've had a lot of rain lately where I am, and he loved the rain. And rain, it was raining when we spread his ashes. And to this day, every time it rains, I'm like, okay, I got it. You're here. Okay. And it takes you right back to that moment. Um, don't beat yourself up over it. And it seems like maybe that's what this person is kind of doing. You have to cut yourself some slack.
Mhm.
Grief is tricky. Grief is not an easy thing to go through. It really, really is a journey to go through grief. And you can't live in the past either. You have to find some way to put one foot in front of the other and gradually give yourself that time to grieve so
Mhm.
that you can heal. And when it's an entire family, it's just that much harder. So just be kind to yourself, please.
And start to see the little moments where joy is coming back in or the light is coming back in because there is support around you. It's just a matter of letting it in. So,
Yep.
yep. Anyone else who's watching have any questions or topics you would like us to talk about today? So,
All right.
all
um,
righty then.
yeah. One of the things that kind of goes with grief for a lot of people is asking for help from the divine, from source, God, whatever name you want to use. Um, and that's something else that I've had a lot of people asking about is working with angels. When you have anything that is dramatic, whether it's an injury or an illness or a death in the family, you have to understand you do have support even when it feels like you don't.
Mhm.
And I tell people all the time, it's okay if you don't believe in divine beings like angels and ascended masters or some ETs actually, because they still believe in you.
Yes,
And
I know that firsthand from I had last week. I had some experiences with my spirit team last week and said some things that, but yet they're still here for me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and they are there for you. It's um, it's really important to know that though. So many people have told me, how do I do that? You just say, okay, help me. I mean, it's really that simple.
Okay, so the viewer who's writing in and asking all these questions, no,
Hmm.
it is not your time to go yet. There's
No, it
work
is
that
not.
you need to do. And part of it is for you to go through this so that you can then be an example of how other people can go through it. So this is part of your journey and why you're on this journey right now. And I hate to put it this way, but you're kind of fighting that piece of it. So you need to let go of the fight and the struggle and just know that you went through a lot of this stuff because you need to come out on the other side and you need to see how
Yeah.
strong that you really are. And you're doubting that right now. So
Yeah.
that was the message I was supposed to give you. So,
One thing that I used to do is every time I went by a mirror in my house or caught my reflection in a window or glass door, I would force myself to smile.
mhm.
And sometimes the smiles were so painfully, and they were so obviously painful that I would crack myself up, forcing myself to smile, which gave me a little bit more positive energy to keep going. And sometimes that's really what you have to do. Find your little tiny moments that make yourself feel better and just hold on to those.
And again, I think we're living in very unprecedented times.
Uh,
There's so much happening. We're constantly in this state of fear, like the war with Ukraine and Russia. I'm not very political, but I mean, that coming at us all the time and all this hate that's going on, it's affecting everybody. And especially if you're sensitive, it affects you more. And some people don't even know they're sensitive and don't know why they're so affected.
yeah.
But I mean, just start to pay attention to that stuff because we all get burned out. And so it's really important to do self care as well, which is why we didn't do a show for 3 weeks is Kelly and I on different weeks both needed to do some self-care.
Yeah, we
So
need to coordinate better in the future.
yeah, we need to both have our experiences on the same week. So but I think that's one of the things Kelly and I have always wanted to demonstrate to everyone is that we're not going to force things. If it's not right, we're not going to do it, or we're not going to share it, or we're not going to put it out there. It has to be in alignment. And usually we're both pretty much in alignment. But if we're not, we'll say, hey, I can't do a show today because we don't want to put that energy out into the world.
No.
Because there's people who look to us and look to what we're putting out there. So if we're not in a space where we can send that vibration out, it's not helpful for us to just come on to do a show.
Right. And I think that's probably something else we can talk a little bit about is what you do put out
Mhm.
into the universe. Um, there's a lot going on. There's wars and natural disasters and, all kinds of stuff going on. Someone told me this morning that we've been bombarded with solar flares as well. And all of that combines to make everyone tense and everyone grumpy. And if you have anything to be angry or upset about, it's going to intensify that. So be mindful. If you're starting to feel yourself slide and you're not in a good frame of mind, maybe don't have a whole lot of conversations with people that normally get you riled up because it's not, no good's going to come from that. That's not what we need to be doing right now. We need to be sending out peace and love and light and acceptance and all of these wonderfully positive things that people have been trying to get people to do for years.
Mhm.
So, really, when you're going through anything in your life that's difficult, you have to realize that subconsciously you're looking through everything else in your life and in the world through that filter.
Mhm.
So, just, kind of be mindful about what you're saying and what you're putting out into the universe.
Yeah, it's just all important.
It is.
Yeah. Hmm. I paid attention to see if there were any orbs behind me while we were talking. They've been starting to come back a little bit, so that's kind of fun. Um,
I missed them.
yeah, I missed seeing them too. I always think they're fun when they come in. It's just knowing that we're supported, that there's forces greater than ourselves. And I think that everyone who sees them finds a sense of joy from seeing the orbs. So I think it serves a lot of purposes. So
Yeah. Okay. Um, why do they want me to explain orbs? It's an energy. That's what an herb is. It's energy. But I think they're talking about other energies. Okay. They want to talk about other energies
Okay.
that I'm trying to decipher what they're saying. I'm translating here. Um, when you're going through, not only putting it out into the universe, what you're doing is if you're putting out a lot of grief and a lot of anger and a lot of why me and a lot of all of that stuff, what you're doing is inviting more of that.
Mm.
And what they're saying is that is what we have done to our planet is we've put out greed and we've put out anger and we've put out me, mine. And that's kind of what's coming home now.
What is it like attracts
Mhm.
like attracts like?
Absolutely. It does. Stop that. Now we're going to have your orbs are back and my coughing is back.
Well,
Um,
was there an orb? Right.
but that's their way of saying what I already said was be mindful of what you're putting out. You have to understand that when you're fearful, that's what darkness feeds on.
Mm-hmm.
It feeds on that fear. And, especially associated with grief, there are people who are very fearful.
Mm-hmm.
They've lost someone, family breadwinner, someone that was always there for them. So make sure you're grieving in a healthy way.
Well, I think one of the things that we're also talking a little bit about is frequency, right? And
Hmm.
every emotion vibrates at a certain frequency. Grief, hate, anger are all lower vibration emotions.
Right.
Love, joy, laughter, those are all higher vibration emotions. So when you're stuck in kind of that negative cycle, it makes it easier for darkness, whatever you want to call it, negative energies to come in, vibrating higher and making sure that you're clear, then higher frequencies can come in. Just
I
for you.
know. This is insane. Sorry. When I was doing a lot of grief counseling, what we would tell people is, yeah, you're going to cry. You're going to miss them. You're going to be upset. You're going to go through those stages of grief. But at least once a day, remember something about them that cracks you up. If you can remember just one thing that they did that was silly or funny or a story they told, that will help you in your grief. And people would say, well, won't that make me miss them more? For a split second, probably. But the thing is, you're focusing on something positive. You're remembering them in a kinder, gentler, more positive way.
I'm laughing because you remember Tab, the drink Tab? It was the precursor to Diet Coke. And
Right.
so my mother loved Tab. Like she'd never moved to Diet Coke. She wouldn't move to any other diet soft drinks. And then Coca-Cola took Tab off the market for a while.
Yep.
My mother called every person under the sun at Coca-Cola until she got someone to bring it back.
Wow.
I'm sure there were other people too, but then the grocery store started stocking it again. So she was a happy camper, but it was and I oftentimes think about that.
Yep.
But it's just when I think about Tab, and I kept one can just as a reminder. I have it in my refrigerator, but I just think it's funny. It just cracks me up. Like, Mom, there's other drinks. No.
Yeah, my mom was like that about lemon Pepsi, I think it was. It was some weird combination they had in like the 70s, and I never understood it. But, my grandmother saved the twist ties from bread,
Mhm.
and she had like a big big coffee can full of them. And I always thought it was hilarious. Why on the world? Why would you save that? And after she transitioned, we went and cleaned out her apartment, and she kept plastic bags, and she kept rubber bands, and she kept all of these things that you wouldn't think to keep.
Unless you lived through the Depression.
Depression, exactly. That's what it was. And she kept anything and everything she might ever have a need for.
Mhm.
And while I understand in the Depression that was, what you had to do, when she passed away, it was 1993. Okay, you didn't need all of those. And we laughed and we laughed and we cried and we laughed and we cried. And that was very cleansing for us
Mhm.
as a family, just going through and cleaning out her apartment. And it was just, you cling to things that make you remember what you loved so much about them and who they were.
Mhm.
And by doing that, you can kind of start feeling better. At least that was the theory when I was doing grief counseling.
Mhm.
Yeah, depression era people did save all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I remember hearing those stories, and if there's anyone else has any questions or things that you want us to talk about tonight, please let us know. And again, we understand that this is a difficult subject to talk about, and it's an important one. We need to take the stigma away from being able to talk about death and dying.
About
'Cause
anything, really.
no one gets out of here alive.
Nope.
So, and I'm not trying to be flippant or anything like that. I think that it's just important to start to have these conversations. And I know for me, I I don't know, at the time I thought it was a privilege, but now I do. I got to have that conversation with my mother about what happens when you really die, and
Right.
what was going to happen. And I'm like, have you had visits from any of your relatives? And she's like, yes, but and so we actually talked about all those things. And I'm one of those people who also frustrates doctors because I knew where we were heading before they did, and they didn't take that too kindly.
Yeah, they usually don't.
Neither did hospice when I told them when things were going to happen. And they're like, no, it's not. And then, of course, it would happen. And they're like, how did you know? And I'm just like, you know. So the other thing I want to talk a little bit about, if it's okay with you, you
Sure.
become okay with your gifts. Like when you have gifts like that, it's like today I was talking to a palliative care nurse and I'm like, screw it. I'm psychic. I know when things are going to happen. And I just put it out there today, whether she believed it or not. And I'm just like, she's like, wow, you've had a lot of experiences where you knew exactly when things were happening. And her way of explaining it to me is, well, obviously you were just really close to them. And I'm like, okay, we can go with that if that's how you
Sure.
need to think about it for
Sure.
yourself.
Let's go there.
But, because I've never had the need to make anyone think or feel the way that I do. I think the way that people think and feel is unique to them. It's great when I meet people who have similar outlooks on things that I do, but it's also about becoming comfortable enough in yourself and what you believe that you don't have to have people agree with you
Right.
in order to feel that way.
Well, and people need to understand we need to be more accepting because not everyone believes like we do.
Mhm,
It doesn't mean on the other side everybody doesn't get along,
mhm,
but there have been I've been blessed to know so many different people from so many different cultures, and every one of them is different. And you go to some funerals and it's more like a fiesta. And I'm like, wait a minute. But yeah, we don't need to be so sullen and so somber. Um, One of the things, and it's in a book that will come out later this year, I promise, um, is when my grandmother died, when she transitioned, we everybody was flung to the four corners of the earth, if you
mhm.
believe the flat Earth theory. But we were all around the world. There were no two of us in the same place, barely the same continent, and yet everyone got there so quickly. And other people that happened to be around where she was were just astonished. How in the world did you all get here so quickly? Well, because she told us all when she was going to die. So we all had a day or two advance to get the plane fare done. And that's what happened. But on the way to the funeral, which was running late, we were always running late. We were singing the Tiny Toons Adventure theme song. If anybody remembers cartoons in the early 90s. And it was just when we got out at the cemetery, people were just, what are they laughing and joking about? Well, because we had been singing because there were so many children with us. Mm-hmm. And our thought was, we'll make it less terrifying for the kids. Mm-hmm. But it was amazing how much it elevated everyone's mood. And it wasn't just the kids who got out of the car giggling and laughing. It was the adults as well. And I think we need to take more time to do those kinds of things, because even though we were grieving horrifically, it was just a pain like no other in my life at that point. It did lighten the mood a little bit. And sometimes that's all you need is a couple of minutes. So.
Well, and I think it's to remember too that everything is an ebb and a flow.
Right.
It can't be. It's like the other example I used to use with my clients all the time is you can't cry consistently 24 hours a day. Eventually, you'll get dehydrated. You'll stop crying at some point. But when those floodgates open, it feels like they're just going to last forever and ever and ever. But it's not possible.
You have to let them flow, though. People make a terrible mistake by choking off tears and not really feeling. If you feel it, just let them flow.
But eventually you're going to stop crying. Like I stopped crying on the way to work because one day I just wasn't crying anymore.
Right. Well, tears, what people don't understand a lot of the times is they're very healing, and you have to let them out in order to heal. So, I think everyone should cry.
There's I'm going to plug Yanla Van Zant for a minute. She wrote a book called Yesterday I Cried, and there's a chapter in the book about every kind of tears. And it's a really interesting chapter. So I recommend that book if people haven't read it. But we are kind of at that time.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for watching. Again, please subscribe, like, and share our podcast with people. We appreciate all of you. We appreciate you guys taking the time to watch us live or to watch the replays. And we love hearing from you. So keep comments and questions coming.
Yep.
We'll be back again, hopefully in 2 weeks this time.
Hopefully.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.